We've all seen the images of World War II's epic battles, but not every critical fight was on the front lines, and not every survival method made it into the history books. Some were developed in silence, born out of necessity by ordinary people and elite soldiers when nothing else worked. These were quiet, powerful methods for hiding the very lifeblood of resistance and survival: food, ammunition, radios. Intelligence, when being discovered, meant certain death. Passed between units in whispers and guarded like treasure, many of these ingenious techniques have been overshadowed by the grand strategies of the war. They represent a different kind of warfare, fought with shovels and secrecy, where a single misplaced stone could unravel an entire network. In this video, we'll uncover 11 of these forgotten cache-hiding methods that kept hope alive, and explain exactly how they worked. Number 1. The underground kettle cache. Our first forgotten method takes us to the fields and forests of occupied France. For an agent of the British Special Operations Executive or a member of the French Resistance, hiding airdropped supplies from constant German patrols was an immense problem. The solution was a brilliant, though punishing, technique known as the underground kettle cache. The method was deceptively simple in concept, but incredibly labor-intensive. It began with a piece of ground that looked completely unremarkable, chosen for its nondescript nature. The first step was the most critical. The top layer of turf, complete with its root system and unique flora, was cut out with surgical precision and set aside on a tarp. Then a narrow shaft was dug, just wide enough for a person to squeeze into, going down 6 or 7 feet. This part of the work was slow, exhausting, and claustrophobic. Once at the desired depth, the digger would begin to hollow out the bottom, creating a much larger chamber shaped like an inverted kettle. This is where the name comes from. The supplies, wrapped meticulously in waterproof material, were then lowered and placed in this bulb-shaped cavern. What made this trick so powerful wasn't just the depth, but the clever design. The narrow entrance made detection by German patrols using simple steel probing rods nearly impossible. A probe might miss the narrow shaft entirely, or if it found it, would only suggest a small, insignificant hole, perhaps an animal burrow, not the large supply chamber hidden just beyond its reach. Once the supplies were secured, the soil was replaced layer by layer, and the original turf was meticulously put back in its exact place. Nature would soon erase any sign of disturbance. This method has been largely forgotten because of its sheer difficulty and the specific conditions required. It demanded the right soil and hours of backbreaking, solitary labor, a patient craft lost in a modern, fast-paced world. Number 2. Submerged river caches. Hiding supplies on land was one thing, but using water itself as concealment presented an entirely different set of challenges and opportunities. This led to the development of the submerged river cache, a high-risk, high-reward method used in territories with an abundance of rivers, lakes, and marshes. The concept was straightforward: put vital supplies in a waterproof container and sink it to the bottom. The execution, however, was fraught with difficulty. The containers had to be perfect. Often, partisans would use large oil drums, or more commonly, standard-issue ammunition cans, sealing the seams with heated pitch or tar. The key was creating a vessel that could withstand being underwater for weeks or months without a single drop of water seeping in. The location also had to be carefully chosen. A slow-moving, deep section of a river, marked by an inconspicuous feature on the bank like a strangely shaped tree or a specific rock that an enemy patrol would never look at twice. The cache then had to be weighted and anchored with ropes tied to heavy rocks or sunken logs to prevent it from being moved by the current. Retrieval was just as risky, almost always done in the dead of night. It involved quietly wading or boating to the exact spot, grappling for the container in the dark, and hauling the heavy, mud-covered prize to shore without making a sound. This method is forgotten today for several reasons. The risk of container failure was high, and a single leak could be catastrophic, ruining priceless radios or ammunition. It also required an intimate, generational knowledge of the local landscape and waterways that modern survivalists might not have. Number 3. False floor and wall caches. When the war moved into the cities and towns, the home itself had to become a fortress of secrets. Here, the threat wasn't a random patrol in a forest, but the methodical door-to-door search by the Gestapo. This constant pressure led to the widespread and sophisticated use of false floor and wall cavity caches. These methods turned ordinary architecture into masterclass hiding places. A resistance cell with a skilled carpenter could carefully pry up floorboards, construct a shallow, hidden compartment between the joists, and then replace the boards. The key was in the microscopic details. The nails had to be aged to match the originals, and dust and grime from the surrounding area were reapplied to eliminate any sign of freshness. Underneath, in a space just a few inches deep, could lie pistols, forged papers, or a life-saving radio transmitter. A stunning example of this was discovered in 2017, when a couple remodeling their home in France found a cache of weapons hidden in the walls, likely left by the Maquis resistance. Wall cavities were used in the same way, with bricks painstakingly removed and then carefully patched over with perfectly matched mortar. Sometimes these caches were hidden behind heavy, immovable furniture, like a massive armoire. What made this method so powerful was that it was a direct counter to the Gestapo's thorough tactics. The only defense was to create hiding places so integral to the building structure that they were functionally invisible, hiding the war in the very fabric of daily life. Number 4. Tree hollow caches. In the dense, ancient forests of the Eastern Front, Finnish soldiers became masters of using their environment as both a shield and a weapon. This philosophy extended to how they hid their supplies and brought us to the tree hollow cache. For a Finnish soldier, the woods were an ally, and they learned that a seemingly solid tree could be transformed into a perfect natural container. The method was simple in theory, but required deep woodcraft. A soldier would find a suitable tree, often one with a natural cavity or a large, thick trunk. They would carefully cut a section of bark and wood out of the trunk, hollow a space inside, and then meticulously replace the plug. The key was to disguise the entrance flawlessly. Bark from the same tree was used to cover the opening, held in place with wooden pegs or natural resin, and moss and lichen were artfully reapplied to blend it into the surrounding trunk. Inside, soldiers would store ammunition, food, and critical medical kits. This system of distributed caches allowed Finnish ski troops to travel light and fast, operating in small, mobile units that could survive for extended periods deep in the wilderness. They established a series of these caches along their patrol routes, knowing supplies were always waiting. It was a decentralized, resilient system that made them incredibly effective against larger road-bound forces. This technique is forgotten primarily because it's so dependent on the right environment. It requires old-growth forests with abundant large trees, a landscape that is less common today. Number 5. The rock pile cache. From the forests, we move to the harsh, exposed, and seemingly featureless landscapes of North Africa. Here, a different natural feature was exploited for concealment: rocks. This led to the rock pile cache, a method that required a keen eye for subtlety, a phenomenal memory, and immense discipline. The principle was simple: hide something in a place so obvious it becomes invisible. This technique was used extensively by elite units like Britain's Long Range Desert Group, LRDG, who operated for weeks at a time deep behind enemy lines. An LRDG patrol would dig a shallow pit for fuel, water, or rations, and then build a cairn, or pile of rocks, over it. The real artistry was in making the pile look completely natural, as if it had existed for centuries, weathered by wind and time. They had to choose rocks that matched the surrounding area in type and color, and arrange them in a chaotic, random pattern that only nature could seemingly create. The success of this method depended entirely on the skill and discipline of the soldiers. The LRDG were experts in desert navigation, using sun compasses and celestial readings. A cache's location might be recorded as a precise bearing and distance from a distant, barely visible landmark. Forgetting the location or miscalculating the navigation meant the supplies were lost forever in the vastness of the desert. The rock pile cache is largely forgotten today because modern technology, especially GPS, has made the meticulous, non-electronic navigation and memory work of the LRDG seem archaic. We are halfway through our journey into the hidden world of World War II. The ingenuity you've seen so far is remarkable, turning everyday objects and landscapes into critical tools of survival. If you are finding these forgotten stories of skill and survival interesting, take a moment to subscribe. We're dedicated to uncovering the secrets that history has left behind. Now, let's get back to the shadows of the war. Number 6. Camouflaged pit caches. In the sweltering, rain-soaked jungles of the Pacific Theater, soldiers fought not only the enemy, but also a relentless environment. Hiding supplies from experienced trackers required a deep, almost spiritual understanding of the jungle, which led to the perfection of the camouflage pit cache. This was a significant evolution of a simple hole in the ground. Just digging a hole and covering it with leaves wasn't nearly enough. An experienced Japanese patrol could spot unnaturally disturbed earth, displaced soil, or broken vegetation from a distance. The process began by carefully removing the top layer of the forest floor leaves, twigs, vines, and ferns, and setting it aside on a large tarp. After digging the pit and placing the waterproofed supplies inside, the true skill was in meticulously restoring the surface. The reserved layer of forest floor material was painstakingly put back in place, arranged to match the natural fall pattern of leaves and the random scatter of debris. What made this trick so powerful was its ability to leave almost no trace discernible to the human eye. This was crucial for units like the American OSS Detachment 101 in Burma, who relied heavily on airdrops and needed to secure weapons and equipment temporarily before moving them to guerrilla forces. This method has been overshadowed in modern survival lore by more durable solutions, as it was highly susceptible to heavy tropical rains that could cause washouts and was ultimately a temporary measure for securing goods in a hostile environment. Number 7. Buried container caches. While many methods were highly specific to an environment, one technique was almost universally applied across all theaters of war: the buried container cache. While burying things is an ancient idea, World War II soldiers and partisans refined it into a systematic science that formed the backbone of long-term storage for resistance movements. The absolute key to this method's success was the container. The undisputed king was the standard issue steel ammunition can. With its rugged construction, and, most importantly, its rubber gasket seal, it could protect its contents from moisture almost indefinitely. For larger caches, sealed oil drums were used. The process was methodical and scientific. A hole was dug, often below the frost line in colder climates, to prevent the ground from heaving and exposing the container. The container was placed inside, sometimes on a bed of gravel, for improved drainage, and sensitive items like firearms were heavily coated in protective grease like cosmoline before being wrapped. Just as important was marking the location for future retrieval. Since these caches were intended for long-term storage, relying on memory alone was far too risky. Coded maps were created, often using triangulation from multiple permanent landmarks like a church steeple, a specific bridge abutment, and an ancient tree. This method was used to secretly arm entire resistance groups in occupied Europe ahead of the D-Day landings, creating vast hidden networks of buried arsenals that fueled the fight for liberation. Number 8. False well caches. In the rural landscapes of Europe, a common and essential feature of many farms and villages became an ingenious, if terrifying, hiding place, the water well. This gave rise to the false well cache, a method that took nerves of steel. A well was ideal for several reasons. It was deep, making supplies impossible to see from the surface, and it was a place that occupying forces, wary of contamination or booby traps, were unlikely to search thoroughly. The simplest version involved lowering items in a heavily weighted, waterproof bag or container to the very bottom, letting it sink into the silt. A more sophisticated method was a false bottom, or a hidden ledge built into the well shaft just above the waterline, accessible only to someone who knew exactly where to feel for it. An even cleverer variation involved a submerged cache tethered to a hidden retrieval line, with the line running up the side of the well wall and secured by a disguised pin or hook just below the lip of the well. This method, however, was not without considerable and terrifying risks. If a container leaked and contaminated the water supply, or if the cache was discovered, it would immediately and without question implicate the family that owned the well, often leading to brutal reprisals. Number 9. Camouflaged roof caches. Back in the urban jungle, where every square inch of living space was subject to sudden and violent search, resistance fighters had to think vertically. This led to the camouflaged roof cache, a clever method that used the often neglected and cluttered attics and roof spaces of city buildings. An attic in an old European building is often a dark, dusty maze of beams, strange angles, and forgotten junk, making it an excellent environment for concealment. In many cases, insulation might consist of a thick, loose layer of sawdust or wood shavings. It was a simple matter to hide a waterproof package containing a radio or documents deep inside this material and then carefully smooth the insulation over the top. A more secure method involved creating a false panel in the attic floorboards or a hidden compartment built directly into the roof supports. SOE radio operators who had to transmit and move quickly to evade German direction-finding teams relied on such methods. The attic of a friendly building was a relatively safe place to string an antenna and transmit from, and the bulky radio could be quickly hidden if a search was imminent. Number 10. Disguised furniture caches. Perhaps the most audacious and psychologically taxing hiding method took place right in the middle of a room, under the very noses of the enemy. The disguised furniture cache was the ultimate expression of hiding in plain sight. A heavy wooden dining table, a large wardrobe, or a bookshelf were all potential candidates. This required master-level carpentry skill to hollow out a hidden section and then replace the piece so that the seams were utterly invisible to the naked eye. This method was a high-stakes psychological game. It relied on the powerful assumption that search parties were looking for things hidden away in walls, under floors, or buried outside, not things that were an integral part of the everyday environment. A soldier might tap a wall or probe the ground, but would he think to take apart a family's dining table? The sheer audacity of it was its greatest protection. The family had to live with these secrets daily, sitting at the very table or using the very wardrobe that held forbidden weapons or intelligence. Discoveries of such items still happen today, a testament to the incredible nerve and risks ordinary people were willing to take. Number 11, the Finnish Mahti and supply caches. Our final method is less a single technique and more a brilliant tactical doctrine that was entirely dependent on a vast network of hidden supplies. It takes us back to Finland during the brutal Winter War, where the outmatched Finnish army employed an ingenious strategy known as Mahti tactics. Mahti is a Finnish word for a pile of logs waiting to be chopped. In military terms, it meant encircling and isolating entire divisions of the road-bound Soviet army. Finnish ski troops, masters of the frozen forests, would let massive Soviet columns advance along narrow forest roads. Then they would strike at multiple points, cutting the columns off into smaller, isolated pockets, the Mahtis. These trapped, encircled units were then left to freeze and starve, unable to maneuver or be resupplied. But how did the small Finnish units operate for weeks in sub-zero temperatures, seemingly living off the land? The answer was a pre-planned, distributed network of supply caches. The Finnish military had undertaken a massive, secret effort to hide weapons, ammunition, and food throughout the wilderness using many of the methods we've discussed, such as tree hollows and buried containers. A Finnish patrol wouldn't carry weeks of supplies. They would travel light and fast, navigate to the nearest hidden cache, restock on food and ammunition, and continue their mission of harassment and encirclement. What made this so devastatingly powerful was the incredible speed, endurance, and resilience it gave them. It's a profound reminder that sometimes the most effective weapon isn't a tank or a plane, but a simple box of supplies, hidden in the right place, waiting for the right moment. In summary, from the farm fields of France to the frozen forests of Finland, the story of World War II is filled with these remarkable tales of quiet ingenuity. The 11 methods we've explored show us a hidden dimension of the conflict, a war fought not with massive armies, but with shovels, saws, and secrets. They show us how the most ordinary features of life, a floorboard, a well, a tree, a piece of furniture, were transformed into powerful tools of resistance and survival. These caches, now largely forgotten, were the silent arsenals that kept the flame of defiance alive in the darkest of times. What other forgotten secrets do you think are still buried from the war? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.